Hey there, neighbor. Welcome to Wild Homestead Living. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Julie, and welcome to our March Homestead Hangout. This is the time where we give you an update on our own homesteading journey over the last month.
From advancements in our home improvement projects to getting a start in the garden and wildlife getting a start on spring on the property, March was a pretty eventful month and we have a lot to share with you.
We do, including a really important special announcement, so be sure to stick with us till the end.
Let's get started. In earlier Homestead Hangouts, we talked about how some of our ambitions had to be delayed due to the need to re-roof and re-side our house. The siding project started in November and has gone less than smoothly, but is now nearing completion. The original late 80s, early 90s aesthetic of the house has been replaced with a closer semblance of the farmhouse look we were envisioning. Only a few minor details and painting of the trim remain, but we're mostly happy with the results, and will be relieved to see the completion of this project.
We continued with our farmhouse guest room makeover and the faux beams. Last month, we put together the actual box shape, but this month we beat up the wood, aged it, and made it look as if it had come out of a barn where it had been 100 years, even including fake nail holes. After some staining, we applied braces to the ceiling attached to our joists, and then put the beams on those. We're really pleased with the results. Our worm bin continues to flourish, so much so that we had an abundance of worms. We've often heard that worms will regulate their own population to the size of their bin, but that has not been the case for us. We have experienced our worm population exploding and getting very crowded in our bin, but that has not been a problem. We put out an announcement to other homesteaders in our valley about our overpopulation of worms and were quickly contacted by another homesteader who had a surplus of eggs but was looking to start a worm bin. We exchanged some of our bounty to the benefit of all. March is a very exciting time for vegetable gardeners in the Great Pacific Northwest, otherwise known as Gardening Zone 8B. This is the time when we can finally start planting some seeds outdoors and starting seeds indoors. We are really big fans of using soil blocks to start seeds indoors, but after our issues last year with potential herbicide contamination, we've become very cautious and decided to go back to the old school plastic seed containers. And even though that's not what we expected, it's okay. Every season is a new opportunity to grow and learn with nature and with our gardens. We planned our 2022 garden over the cold, dark winter months, and now it was finally time to put that plan into action, starting with peas. They're the first thing that can be planted directly in the ground outside in our area. Peas are not only delicious as garden vegetables, but they can actually help enhance your soil. Where some plants only consume nutrients from the soil, peas and other members of the legume family actually add nutrients back in. In particular, peas and other members of the legume family are really good at fixing gaseous nitrogen that's in the air into the soil in a form that plants can use. It often shows up as little nodules on their root system. After these peas have lived a good life and produced copious vines and tasty pods, we'll cut them off at the soil line, and those roots will decompose, and the nutrients in the roots will be available to the next crop that follows. Last spring, we planted bare root strawberries in cloth grow bags. While they're doing really well, in the wintertime, we moved them into the greenhouse. This was to protect them from the cold winter that we had, but also to protect them from the construction workers who are re-siding our house. During their first year with us, we plucked all of the fruit before it could ripen so they could focus their energy on their roots. We're very much looking forward to fresh strawberries this season.
Despite the arrival of spring, most days were surprisingly quiet in the wooded sections of our homestead in March. A few species of birds could be heard singing in the morning, but on many days I heard nothing but the sound of my own footsteps as I walked our trails looking for signs of our wild neighbors. I did see other signs of spring as native plants like this osoberry came into bloom, and salmonberry also started leafing out and flowering. These two species provide early nectar and pollen for hummingbirds and bees, and will later provide fruit for a variety of other animals. Red elderberry that began leafing out in March will provide fruit for wildlife later in the summer, as will the thorny swamp gooseberry plants that are found in and around the seasonal wetland on our property. The wetland itself has already begun to shrink, but the local frog population is currently using it to welcome the next generation. We turned branches from trail maintenance performed in March into a large brush pile for wildlife, while elsewhere on the property, habitat improvement sounded like this. We use old shipping boxes for our ongoing fight against invasive knotweed, but the packing tape just makes a non-biodegradable mess, so we remove it before laying the cardboard out to smother the plants. We continue to monitor wildlife using trail cams in March, and we now have 2 cameras with solar power cells at the back of the property. We've had one at the edge of the woods for a few months now, but March was the first month in which we had a camera monitoring the trail through our upper woods. It turned out to be our most active cam for the month. On March 9th, we had 6 black-tailed deer move past the camera in quick succession. They appeared to all be young bucks that had dropped their antlers. As this last deer pauses for a moment, you can clearly see the stalks where the antlers used to be. A minute after the last deer passed, something startled the herd. There was a bit of confusion, and they appeared to be startling one another before they disappeared from view. Having never had a camera on this trail before, we were unaware that it appears to be a highway for Virginia opossums. They were captured by the camera nightly on March 9th, 10th, and 11th, and one large individual made an encore appearance on March 13th. The only other species captured on the new trail cam was this eastern cottontail and 1 coyote, but I somehow managed to delete the coyote footage, so you'll have to use your imagination. Deer activity shifted to the camera at the edge of the woods toward the end of the month. On the 24th, 3 bucks came timidly out of the woods. One of them again paused to give a good look at the pedestals where this year's antlers were and next year's will eventually be. On the 25th, the doe paused for a close-up. She seemed puzzled by the camera, or maybe wary because it looks like an eye. Eventually, she lost interest and moved on. Another doe passed a minute later, giving a half-hearted stomp toward what I suspect might have been one of her cats in the window. A pair of American robins are the first birds we have seen actively nesting on our homestead in March. Their nest is in an arborvitae along the drive, and they are frequently seen foraging in the front yard to provide food for their growing young. At the end of March, a male pileated woodpecker was seen feeding and excavating exploratory nest cavities in our large cottonwood snag. They are fairly shy birds, but this male hung in there even when our neighbor fired up whatever it is you can hear in the background here. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll eventually be able to share footage of these amazing birds raising this year's young. We'll keep you posted. In late March, we partook in our annual tradition of spring nettle gathering. Many people are only familiar with stinging nettle as a plant that is to be avoided at all costs, but if you can get past the plant's unpleasant defense mechanism, there's a lot to like about it. Still, the plants are best harvested with care, as their needle-like projections can cause serious discomfort if you so much as brush up against them. Over the many years we've been collecting nettles, we've gotten pretty good at avoiding being stung, although we always end up with at least 1 or 2 welts for our efforts. Back on the homestead, we have a favorite recipe in which we use the harvested nettles. The cooking process effectively removes the sting from the plant, but does not remove the many nutrients the nettles contain. We always look forward to enjoying this delicious taste of spring. So there's a glimpse at what we've been up to in the past month. As Julie mentioned, though, in the beginning of the video, we do have a big announcement to make.
And that announcement that this is going to be the last in our Homestead Hangout series. We have done 12 months in a row, and over this time we have learned and grown so much along with you and this community. And we have lots of really exciting ideas and projects in the works, but with both of us also working full-time jobs, we don't have enough extra time left over for everything. So we've decided to call this a wrap so that we can devote our time to bringing you other content that you have been asking us for. But it's not goodbye. If you would like to stay in touch with us, we really encourage you to go over to our website, which is wildhomesteadliving.com, and sign up for our free newsletter or one of our free guides, or both. We have one about getting started with vegetable gardening and one about getting started with homesteading, whether you live in the city, country, or somewhere in between.
Thank you so much for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
Love you too, sweetie. Love you too. Think it's time to plant some peas?
Wait, do you hear that?
Silence?
Yes.
Except birds.
Let's see how long it lasts.
No more heavy machinery. Don't feel like I'm in an industrial park.
I don't think it'll last forever.
We better
Let's
go.
get rolling.
Okay.